Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, everyone, and a special welcome for those joining us online. My name is Rita Hayim from Caritas Internationalis, and I will be facilitating this session called Voices and Visions for a World Without Stigma, Recommendations of Affected Persons and Communities in Dialogue with Faith Leaders. Our session is going to be interactive. After listening to our panelists, we're gonna break out into groups, and we're gonna reflect together on what we can do better to work together and what do we want to see as outcome of this conference. Without further ado, allow me to welcome our panelists and ask them to join us here. So Valeria Rashinska from 100% Life Ukraine, Gracia Violetta Ros-Quiroga from World Council of Churches joining us online, and Echo Tashi Mensah, Youth Ambassador from Ghana. Without further ado, I will leave the floor to Valeria. Valeria, thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to listen to your speech. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Valeria Rachinska. I represent here organization 100% Life, and I'm a woman who living with HIV openly. 12 years. And I'm proud of it. To be honest, I was very impressed today by the speech of mom of kid that died from AIDS. And I was thinking about my mom, how she reacted on this kind of information when she was thinking that I'm gonna die as well. I was thinking about Pope that was telling about Mother Mary who was suffering so much when she saw her son suffering. I was thinking about this 12 or already 10 million campaign about their mothers. 10 million mothers that suffering about their kids, knowing that they're without treatment and they're gonna die. 10 million angels that God sent to the earth to save life of their kids, and they cannot. It's make me sad, because we can change. We tell them that life do not have price, but it's not true, it have. It's price that costs one kind of medication. And 10 million people will not die. And 10 million moms will not cry. And we will not hear 10 million more stories like this. And we can buy it, just simply buy, and it's cheap. But you know, even with medications, sometimes people dying from stigma and discrimination, from not being accepted by society, from being different, diverse, not like everyone. And it's very hard to acknowledge that it's still possible in the 21st century not to be treated well because you are sick. In the moment when you just need support, help, treatment, kind words, people still receive speech of hate and dying, even with medication because of this hate. And it's important that all the faith-based organizations we can see here, because you can help us. You can help us not to die from hate. Because I'm pretty sure He was sent us by God to give us love, to give us support, to give us care. Everyone, doesn't matter what, status, gay population, no gay population, how you make your sexual life, what you do in your free time. You can provide us with this support. And we have the best examples of this support from Ukraine. Ukraine that's well known right now all over the world because of sad stories of our war. Our war started 2014, not right now. And since 2014, we have our religious organizations, our churches, that stand by us, together with us, fight not only with HIV, but with the consequences of war. We had our war before, even 2014, our war with epidemic and stigma discrimination. And our churches were helping a lot as well. They provided psychosocial support. They prayed for us. They were together with us. So we know that we can receive the help from religious organizations. And 2022, when full Russian invasion started, and we had like a deterioration of everything, the first people who came to help it was churches. Churches that was delivering medications together with us. Churches that was psychologically support us, that were providing training to the soldiers about importance of testing of HIV. Churches that organize shelters, especially for people living with HIV and representatives of gay populations, just because they were not accepted in general population shelters. For me, it's the greatest example how faith-based organizations can be involved in HIV response on all levels. That world without stigma and discrimination is possible. And not only in Ukrainian Orthodox Church, because we work together with all Ukrainian Council of Churches and religious organizations. So this can be done by Muslim, Jewish, and all the religious confessions that exist in the world. We have these best practices. So I do believe that world without stigma and discrimination is possible, and FBOs can contribute significantly in it. If you don't know how to do it, ask us, we will tell you. We have all these best practices of our community members making testing to our priests, HIV tests. And teaching them how to treat us without discrimination. Teach them how to use right words, not to offend anyone. So it works. We are here, just ask us, just ask our priests how they work with us. We are ready to share. We are ready to help everyone, not to have this 10 millions in sad statistic. But, put them in very nice statistic of life, how I live. Healthy kids, healthy me, career, my priests that understand me well and can respond to my challenges, friends, travelings, and to be honest, I wish this kind of life everyone. I'm an example that life without stigma, discrimination, healthy life is possible. And I want all the people not to face any challenges. Find support. And firstly, from FBOs. Use your power, because you are very powerful, to make our lives better. Pray for us, support us, help us. We rely on you, because you're representatives of God here, and we trust Him. Thank you.
Thank you, Valeria, for your wonderful speech, and thank you for reminding us that life without stigma is possible, but thank you more for reminding us that we can do the change, and this is a call for us to do this change. I will leave you now with another speech or testimony from Echo. Echo, the floor is yours.
Hello from everyone here and joining virtually. I am one of the Gen Ended Youth Ambassadors. Gen Ended is a coalition of youth-serving organizations working to end HIV. So somewhere in a very conservative community, a pregnant teen mother confides in her pastor during the early stages of her pregnancy because she didn't know what to do. Now, this pastor, during a Sunday sermon, tells his congregation about what happened, or calls her out, and then asks his congregation to pray for her. Now, what follows is many weeks of discrimination against the teen mother and stigmatization generally. So what happens next? The teen mother decides not to come to church anymore. In another community, a young man who needed funds to access HIV healthcare confides in his pastor, and his pastor was able to mobilize funds to be able to support this young man's treatment. This is not a general experience, but it is one of the experiences that can be shared. In Africa, it is no doubt that faith-based organizations and religious leaders are extremely instrumental in shaping our way of life and our behaviors, which is why it's important that conversations like these happen so that we are able to have that dialogue with religious leaders. And when it comes to HIV education, religious leaders play a huge role in shaping how we think, in advocating for more HIV testing, in endorsing new advances in technology regarding HIV treatment, or in even stigmatizing persons living with HIV, which is why it's very, very important that religious leaders work assiduously with stakeholders in ensuring that there is access to healthcare for persons living with HIV, and then increased HIV education. It's 2022, and what do we see? There's a lot that has been done to increase access to education on HIV, but there is still more that can be done in 2022 and the years to come. So when we look around, we would see children, women, girls being stigmatized, being discriminated because they are living with HIV. And it's happening in our communities, and it's even happening in our religious settings. That is why it's very, very, very key that religious leaders, with the power that you possess, you are able to rally support, you are able to join us in HIV advocacy efforts in order to give the support that is needed and also to increase education. So, as a young person who has embarked on various community outreaches on sexual and reproductive health, I also know how keen it is to have access to education, especially HIV education. So I know sometimes some communities oppose comprehensive sexuality education because they feel maybe young people, or it deprives young people of their innocence. But to be very honest, I think it rather protects us, and then it helps in advancing the health and well-being of women, girls, and young people, which is why comprehensive sexuality education is also very important, especially on our journey to end HIV by 2030. So in this contemporary era, I would like to urge all of us to continue working assiduously with religious leaders as we embark on this long journey to end HIV by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Echo. Thank you for bringing the voice of the youth. And definitely, as you said, it's 2022, but there's still more to be done. I don't know if Gracia was able to join us online. Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you,
Yeah.
and we're happy to have you.
Okay. Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. So my name is Gracia Violeta. I come from Bolivia, a country in Latin America. I am an anthropologist by training, a woman living with HIV and a rape survivor. But currently I am based in Geneva, working with the World Council of Churches, leading the ecumenical HIV and AIDS initiatives and advocacy. So this session is for us to discuss the voices and visions of and recommendations of affected persons for a dialogue with faith leaders. But I need to ask before we start that conversation, who are we when we talk? Well, we are people living with HIV from the developing world, from middle-income countries in all our diversity. And that diversity includes gender, age, cultural background, faith, and choices. And we are people who are living with HIV in the intersection of multiple inequalities like violence, poverty, and unequitable access to health. And because of my commitment to justice, I have to ask you please to remember the voices of so many people that we are not going to be able to hear in this Interfaith Preconference and in the AIDS conference itself because of all the complications that the Canadian government put for visas. I know at least 2 people, young people from Africa living with HIV who were denied had their visas delayed, but had to be there. So in addition to looking at the examples that will be presented, especially in workshop stream 3, in which we will present experiences of local congregations that successfully dealt with stigma, I want to present 3 recommendations for your consideration. The first one is for us as faith sector to end the stigma in the faith sector. UNAIDS data is very clear. The ones who are getting HIV nowadays are the ones that we discriminate in society and in the faith sector. And who are these groups? Well, those are adolescents and young people that we sometimes as faith leaders deny access to comprehensive sexual education. They are transgender women, gay men, men who have sex with men, sex workers, people who use drugs, all of these groups that sometimes we don't find very easy to discuss. And also migrant and mobile population who lose their basic human rights because of a stigma. After 40 years of the HIV response, no sector, but especially the faith sector, should have any excuse to continue a stigma. So this should be an issue of the past for us. Secondly, we should use science to defeat the remaining of HIV stigma. Scientific knowledge that has been brought to us in the last year has been very good. Let me just give the example of undetectable and transmittable HIV. It is finally proven with data that a person who's living with HIV and has undetectable viral load cannot transmit HIV. This is a very powerful information and tool for us to defeat what remains on HIV stigma. Science also gives us solid base for other activities that we find difficult to discuss in the faith sector. For example, the case of young people and comprehensive sexual education. UNICEF and other UN agencies have proven in several reviews and studies that when young people receive this education, they don't go and have sex as crazy as we think sometimes they do. Actually, this education helps them to postpone sexual debut and pregnancies. We can say similar things about the effectiveness of PrEP and the removal of punitive laws for key populations, especially the ones who use drugs. In third place, I'd like to present the recommendation to do intersectoral and multidisciplinary work. HIV continues to be a huge problem for the world and for faith leaders too. Unfortunately, faith alone cannot solve HIV, but it's the combination of faith, science, public health, and human rights which will help us move towards the goal of ending HIV and AIDS. Sometimes I have the perception that we tend to work amongst the ones we know because that's easier, especially for the faith sector, so we don't have to discuss the contentious issues, but we have to be able to sit in the same table with all the groups that are working on HIV, and that includes people living with HIV, all the key populations, all the vulnerable populations, the governments, and the UN agencies, and all the stakeholders at country level. In conclusion, I would like to say that I personally saw the strength of HIV stigma. It is, as someone was saying earlier, it doesn't require money, but it requires a change of mind and a change of heart to get rid of HIV stigma. But as much as I saw the power of stigma, I also saw the power of love. And that is what I'm calling you to do and make it real for us. If we remember, James 4, verse 17, tell us that if we know how to do something good, but we don't do, then that is sin. So HIV stigma is a strong manifestation of injustice. And from the perspective of faith, the principle of justice is holistic and is not blind. When we yearn and when we work for the establishment of the reign of God, it implies that we will have to work to ensure that vulnerable people experience justice and love. And justice cannot be separated from gaze, compassion, and unconditional love and mercy. So these are the three recommendations that I wanted to present for your deliberations, and to ask you to please remember all the people that cannot be there with you face to face. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Gracia, and we're so happy that you're able to join us. Actually, because of time constraint, I would like to propose or ask our panelists, our audience here in Montreal or online as well, especially to our panelists, asking your two questions. What can we do better to work together? And what do we want to see as outcome of this conference? So, especially people joining us virtually, it would be a pleasure to read your answers in the chat. And our panelists?
Okay, what about, what can we do better together? You know, I work in HIV field like quite a long time, and policy making as well and so on. And sometimes you have such nice meetings, such nice resolutions. But on the implementation stage, everything failed. So the only one thing we can do, it's like a transfer, political declarations and our resolution to actions. Not just to say, but implement. And to continue this, after this conference, what I would love to see. You gather all the best practices that we can share with you, of our collaboration, of our experience. You ask us about lessons learned, because not all of our practices were the best, and we learned something. You combine it together, you find funding, and you made like an open call for proposals for faith-based organizations based on our proposals. What can be done better? This would be very nice. I don't know will it happen or not, but I do believe that these actions, all the nice words, all the best practices and lessons learned can have monetization. Something that will save our lives in the future. Something that will not let die the 10 million people. So, actions. Over.
Okay, so to add on to what Valeria rightly said, I think one other thing we can do after this conference is to work very well to engage in community outreaches that seeks to intensify HIV education and then overcome discrimination, because faith-based organizations and religious leaders, really, they have the capacity to reach out and influence large numbers of young people. And from this conference, I would also like to see a renewed commitment amongst religious leaders, amongst faith-based organizations to work together with youth activists and with community-based leaders as we work to overcome stigmatization and discrimination against HIV. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone would like as well to propose next step after this conference? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Marcia Martin, and I have a question for the panelists as well as for everybody here, and it's kind of part of a recommendation. We're oftentimes very polite and careful when we talk to leaders, political or faith or community leaders. And sometimes the language we use just doesn't tell them what they need to know, because we've carefully languaged what we do in HIV. So I'm wondering now, after all of your experience, we could begin to get closer to telling the truth about what we're working with and what we need to do. That's really my question. And I know, Valeria, you said for years that you've been working with the faith community. They've stepped forward, they've worked with. How close can we get to just talking about the real deal, what's going on? Does that make sense? Yeah? I mean, I'll use a simple example. We talk about key populations. Can we just talk about who people are? We talk about behaviors, but we don't really talk about behaviors. So I'm curious, because some people really don't understand what we're trying to work on. We have an infectious disease. It's mostly transmitted through the use of needles and sexual activity. We've been working on this for 40 years, but we have changed our language to the point where sometimes people don't even know what we're talking about. So I'm curious to know, can we get closer to using language that speaks to people really about what's going on? So we can prevent it, we can help people get treatment, and we can really talk about the real deal. That's my question to you.
Thank you. I love you too. Valeria, sorry, I know that you want to say it, but it was my time in Ukraine as UNAIDS country director when exactly this issue we started discussing with the National Council of Religious Organizations and FBOs. And this is absolutely top crucial because I hear it from all regions, from all countries. Language. When we were together meeting first time with the council in Ukraine, they said, but what are you talking about? We don't know what is this LGBTIQ. Explain. And we started together with the network and with some other key populations, describing in detail what it is. And they were responding, oh, but we have them for centuries. So why you are not telling us what is it about? You are using some jargon that doesn't help us at all. So that's actually something that we hear across the world, yes? We definitely need to come together with the language that is the language of, of our communities, but within our communities of our own faith leaders and our own faith partners. If they do not translate our jargon to their own needs and the needs of our own people, it will not be success as it is in Ukraine, where we have imams or priests or pastors openly talking about sexuality issues, about health and rights, about these issues that are really difficult in most of the environments. So fully appreciate your question and asking all of us about additional reflection within these terms, because this is one of the most critical issues. Sorry, I talked too long. There was a question here from the colleague or comment.
Can I just respond to that too? Because I think for both of you, there's two things that are important. You're bringing up the what, and that's really important, what we do to get this language. My colleague here and I have a lot of experience on the how. Because the how, you can't bring community faith leaders into a community meeting and teach them about human sexuality, because they're going to be embarrassed by what they don't know. You got to do it behind closed doors in a safe place where they can ask those questions, where the imams and the priests and the pastors and the rabbis can ask these questions in a safe place. So when we think of the language, it's not only the what, it's the how to give our community faith leaders empowerment, but to give them the respect and the dignity, because I assure you, even today, there's not a lot of comprehensive sexuality education in seminaries and in formation.
I just wanted to make a contribution on what I expect to see after the conference. So after this conference, I expect that young people are engaged more, because we can all attest to the fact that young people actually make more than half of the population. And they are the ones who are also majorly being affected. They are the ones getting infected. They are the ones who are not getting information to help them make informed decisions. For instance, I think a report for Ghana 2 years ago or a year ago actually indicated that it's actually indicated this huge number of young people who are now infected by HIV. And this number has actually increased over time. Why? Because they don't even have access to education. They don't even know what it takes or what comprehensive sexuality education means. This was a major issue in Ghana a year or two ago, where we had leaders actually fighting against comprehensive sexuality education and making the assumptions that it actually promotes promiscuity among young people. So it is important that as we are here for this conference, and even after the conference, it is very, very important for organizations, for religious leaders to work with young people in their communities, in their churches, just to help them get information. And also, in as much as we are trying to get the experiences, where we share practical experiences from other countries, from other organizations, we should also have it in mind that whatever we want to emulate in our various countries needs to be country specific. What actually worked in US cannot maybe work in Ghana. What actually worked wherever else cannot work in another country. So it's important that it has to be country specific to help the people get the understanding of what we are talking about. And also talking about HIV, I totally agree with the language, because we usually tend to sugarcoat these languages, and it doesn't bring out the effect that we want. It doesn't help people to understand the intensity of what we are trying to fight against. So it is important that we don't just attend this conference and share our experiences, but let's also go back home and also act on them. And that is where we would get the results. Thank you.
Thank you. The last comments from the audience before moving to those who are joining us virtually.
Hi. I really want to echo what you've said, because I think you've pointed out to a lot of really important aspects. I think like to your question over there, like by using euphemistic language, it allows us to protect ourselves from actually being advocates, right? Because we can say, I work with key populations. And so when somebody is like, oh, but like, you know, you're a pastor, whatever, it means that I don't have to say, I work with sex workers, I work with people who inject drugs, I work with these groups, right? But I can still go home and feel good about the work that I'm doing. When in reality, like if we actually put ourselves out there, you know, while people are doing things in the background, in the foreground, like other people from those communities are being really harmed by a lot of the stigma and the discrimination. And so while it's important to respect the dignity of like the different kinds of like imams and pastors who are still learning some of this language, you know, the people who are the ones who are experiencing the most amount of discrimination don't have that time. And so unless we start naming like who is actually really suffering from these, you know, from HIV, who's actually suffering from highest rates of like transmission, then, you know, it leaves us kind of at this middle spot that's not necessarily, you know, as particularly helpful. But also like as young people, I think like after this, I want to see an earnest and genuine commitment to centering voices of the people who are most stigmatized. I think it's important when we sit in these forums and listen to different kinds of people that like we are actually trying to listen to those people who are facing the most kinds of discrimination, whether it's transgender people, whether it's, you know, people who inject drugs. Like when I look around this room and when I think about like the things that I've been hearing, you know, there's a lot of amazing leaders that have so much information and such a wealth of knowledge. And as a student, I'm ready to like soak all of that in. But I also know the people who are on the ground, who've never had a degree, who've never touched a job at UNAIDS or anything, who are actually the people who we are talking about, not the people who we are in conversation with. And that feels really like a huge, something that's missing, right? Something that's a space of like, I want to hear more in these spaces, and I want to center those voices in these spaces because the data is great, it's absolutely interesting, it gives us information, but also so is the lived experience that is very real, that is the thing that we're fighting about, that is those names that we're willing to like, you know, not talk about, and not just like, you know, like nice white people's names, but I'm talking about people who are from where I'm from, people who are from you're from, young people who are living with this now, young people who are experiencing it and trying to understand how they're going to deal with it like presently, because those are the ones, you know, when we talk about being in community with, that should be here, that should be the ones, you know, talking up there on that stage. And, you know, I think afterwards, I think that earnest commitment to be like, we will be in community with people. We will invite and center and put on that stage the people who are actually experiencing what we are talking about. And so instead of talking about people, we are talking with people, even in these like, you know, nice hotel, fancy, whatever situations.
Thank you. I would like to read as well the messages that we have received online from Gloria, more research on prevention. From Nwanko, an outcome I would like to see is for the faith community to engage with PLHIV, to champion sensitization at the grassroots level and with the faith community spaces. From Manoj, in the context of declining financial commitment, let us increase our personal and organizational commitments. Let us identify specific actions to deepen engagement and working with communities that are vulnerable and hold each other to account. From Gracia, we have to be bold to speak the truth and be truth. We have to rescue HIV before it falls off from the development agenda. We have to be able to work with all stakeholders and communities. From Margaret, in terms of language, sometimes the words we use are stigmatizing and judgmental rather than supportive. From Nyabuto, I expect to see religious organizations pooling resources together to educate religious leaders on the negative impact of stigma and discrimination to communities. From Christine, we deliberately need to build capacity of interfaith at all levels. Majority of interfaiths at the grassroots level have serious capacity gaps around HIV and other health issues. That's it from the one joining us online. Thank you, everyone. It was a very interactive session, which will open the floor to what we're expecting next. Join me in a round of applause to our panelists, and thank you for those who are joining us online. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rita. Just because of time, we are now going for lunch. The workshop are going to be moved later today. And so we have about 50 minutes for lunch. At 1:30 sharp, we need to be back. We're going to have a very important session with the new ambassador from PEPFAR, Dr. John Kingason, with Monsignor Robert J. Vitillo and UNAIDS representatives. So see you later, and just please be on time.